So, welcome to the third Alchematics Lunch and Learn session. Today, we'll be discussing women in sales from a woman's perspective. As you can see, we have a woman with us today, Zena, my business partner. Say hello, Zena.
Hi, everyone.
Great. So, if you've attended previous sessions, guys, you'll know that we'd like to keep the introductions brief and that these sessions are primarily designed to act as vehicles for sharing ideas and concepts developed within the Alchematics network. As I said, I'm excited today to be joined by my business partner and Alchematics co-founder, Zena Way. Zena's over 20 years experience in sales and sales leadership, so she has obviously a lot to share with us today. But before we talk to Zena, I just want to tell you about one of the responses we received when we sent out invitations to this webinar. A male respondent actually responded to say, I think this session is just for women. Now, he did put a smiley face afterwards, but I think it just goes to show how much we need to have these conversations, and that they need to be part of a more normalized conversation about women in the workplace, not just a conversation for women. I think the smiley face was actually, to me, is quite important because it implies that it's just one of these flippant throwaway comments, but ultimately these are the kind of things we need to do away with, right? So look, before we get into more, Zena, the other thing I just want to mention, I'm going to drop now into the chat box the link to the article that we're going to be referencing throughout the session. This was a Harvard Business Review article entitled "Why Women Are the Future of B2B Sales." So we posted this on LinkedIn back in January. So if you are listening to the session, listen to a recording of the session, then you can just check the Alchematics LinkedIn page and just check. I think it's one of our January posts. Okay, so Zena, for those of you who don't know, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself and a bit of background of your experience, please?
Sure. Well, as you said, Rich, I've worked in sales for over 20 years. I've worked from the ground up in business development as an individual contributor, and then worked my way up then into sales leadership, spanning industries from financial services, fintech, information services, and recruitment.
Excellent. Now, what was really interesting in this article, Zena, published by the Harvard Business Review, as we've said, they highlighted that women are underrepresented in B2B sales specifically, making up only 27 to 30% of the workforce. And I was just wondering, is this in line with what you've experienced?
Early on in my career, yes, but as time's moved on, the split's evened out. I remember in my first role, I was actually only one of two women in a sales department of 30.
Oh wow, really?
So, yeah.
That wasn't back in the 1960s, though, was it? No. Oh, Zena wanted me not to say that joke. Anyway, yes. Okay, so but did you notice it at the time? Obviously, looking back now, it seems quite obvious, but yeah was that you know?
You probably might expect me to say that it was really difficult being in a male-dominated environment and that I felt intimidated, etc. But that just really wasn't the case. I really enjoyed the job. I wasn't really conscious, Rich, about the disparity because I joined a sales role knowing whether I liked it or not, my performance was going to be measured against targets and the performance of others. So, I mean, those others could have been male or female. It really didn't make a difference to me at the time. It was the competitive environment to work in, I suppose, and it just seemed perfectly natural to me.
Yeah.
So success in performance created my path into sales leadership, and I never felt sort of held back for any reason. Okay,
but I know in conversations we've had in the past, you told me that you didn't have, or there wasn't, I guess, a female role model for you within the organizations that you work for. Do you think that this would have had an impact?
In reading the article and thinking back on those early days, in my career, I would probably say having a female mentor, somebody who had sort of been there and that had done that, someone to bounce ideas off and challenges would have been really useful. Absolutely. I mean, it may have created a steeper curve for my development into sales leadership. I definitely believe that.
But do you, but you don't think you were ever marginalised, for example, at all?
Well, as it was, all sales leaders were men. So I guess that on the subconscious level, this impacted the time it took for me to consider my own development into management
Yeah.
or leadership positions. But I'm not saying that personally I felt marginalized.
Okay. So,
Yeah.
so just to clarify then, if you'd seen, and just clarify if I'm here right, so if you'd seen more female leaders in sales, this may have encouraged you to consider your own ability to move into management and leadership sooner. Is that right?
I think so, yes. Yeah. I mean, eventually I progressed into that direction anyway, but it may have accelerated things. I mean, that said, it does, it raises another issue about increasing the number of women who are actually interested in moving into sales. I mean, the article suggests that a change in recruitment language is needed, moving towards what the author classes as gender neutral terms. While I think this may have a positive impact, I think organisations should be focusing on the career development of women already within their organisation.
Okay, tell me a little bit more about that.
Well, absolutely. So, Rich, if you imagine a scenario where all the recruitment advertising has been reviewed and the advert content has driven increased levels of female applicants, they turn up to their interview and they see an office where diversity is actually quite good. Let's say the sales workforce is 40% female, for example. However, they get introduced to the sales management team and they're all male. And then they get introduced to the senior management team and they're all male as well. So the great work that has been done from a recruitment perspective gets undone pretty quickly.
Yeah.
If I'm interviewing for a role, I'm thinking about my future career, really. I mean, if there's an inference that the ability for women to progress is stifled, I'm not going to view that potential employer favourably.
Yeah, no, 100%. It's super interesting actually, because I guess it creates a kind of chicken and egg scenario with regard to diversity programs and also developing a hiring strategy to address any kind of gender imbalance in the sales organization. Now, just out of interest, if you were consulting for any of our listeners today and helping them to improve their business in this respect, I'm really interested in what advice you give them. But before you answer that, I just want to, something I didn't mention at the top of the call. Guys, if you have any questions throughout the session, please feel free to just put them in either in the question box or the chat box. And we'll quite happily read them out rather than saving everything to the end. So sorry, Zena, just to recap, the question was, if you were consulting for any of our listeners today and helping them to improve their business in this respect, what advice would you give them?
I would probably ask one key question in the first instance. Why do you want to increase diversity in your workforce? If the response concerns anything other than improving the performance of the business, my advice would be don't do it.
Yeah.
Let me explain what I mean by that. Increasing diversity from a ratio or a window dressing perspective is not just unnecessary, but damaging. It creates a situation within organizations where people feel that employees are being hired purely on the basis of being in an unrepresented demographic. This can still happen when companies look to improve diversities for the right reasons, so it always has to be considered. I mean, I'm just thinking, on the basis that the company wants to affect the change because they see commercial value in doing so, my advice would be, firstly, don't rush. I mean, if your sales force is 30% women, attempting to then take this to 50%, for example, over the next 12 months would potentially mean increased churn rate or extension of salary budgets. It will also potentially result in the workplace rumour mill kicking into high gear and creating an environment of diversity initiative.
Yeah, I'm sure we've all heard that over the last few years as well anyway.
Absolutely. Secondly, start with reflection. As an organisation, what are you doing and what you can develop all of your existing staff? I mean, is there an existing female population that can and should be developed into leadership roles? As I said earlier, if you value diversity and the benefit it brings to your company, this should be demonstrated throughout the hierarchy and not just at those entry-level positions.
Yeah.
I mean, this would be a good starting point. It's actually creating internal female mentors.
Mm-hmm.
Another point, think about advertising. You could look to ensure that your recruitment communication get reviewed by women. Women within your leadership team, to establish whether the advertising is actually attractive to women. I mean, the article, I think it actually refers to gender neutrality of words, etc. And to be honest, I've never really bought into that idea that terminology is owned by a particular gender.
Yeah, sure.
I mean, I've worked with so many women throughout my career who actually thrive on working in an aggressive, competitive environment. Mm-hmm. As much as I've worked with men who quite happily describe themselves as customer focused and success driven. So, and finally, the interview process. So, think about individuals that you're engaging interviewers from within your business. Again, if we believe that diversity brings improved performance, it stands to reason that where possible, interviews are conducted with panels that are gender balanced.
100%. So do you think that that wording doesn't have as great an effect as the article suggests?
I think wording has a huge impact on how the reader will interpret the advert and what it says about the company. I just think it's dangerous to think that all people in a certain demographic will react the same way.
Yeah.
While I don't doubt that research can support that in general or on average, women will respond more positively to certain words than men, and there will always be members of that group that buck the trend. I think for me, the important thing is that the hiring company knows what it's looking for in terms of skills, qualifications, experience, and responsibilities of the role.
Yeah.
So if the shortlisted candidates meet those criteria, at that point, you may consider the diversity question.
So what you're saying then is gender is, or should be perhaps the final filter as far as the recruitment process goes, rather than one of the initial input criteria, right?
Yeah.
I think we should definitely discuss diversity hiring and certainly positive discrimination in another session, because I think these are hugely interesting topics, but certainly ones that definitely require a lot more time. I just want to read something, just take a step back and read something directly from the article. Guys, if you haven't read this already, I really recommend you do, but it talks about 7 capabilities or skills, if you like, that high-performing salespeople exhibit, and I'll read them to you. So the first is analyzing, so understanding cause and effect and seeing big picture implications. The second is connecting, so building a network of customers, team members, and other resources. Third is collaborating, so that's working cooperatively with others. Shaping solutions is the fourth, and that's understanding customer needs and adapting the offer accordingly. 5 is influencing, so shaping the messages and style to maximize impact. And 6, driving, so applying structured and planned approaches to deliver outcomes. And then finally 7, improving, so constantly seeking to do things better and being prepared to try new things. And the article also goes on to state that both high-performing women and high-performing men used all 7 capabilities to some extent, but high-performing women were more likely to emphasize connecting, shaping solutions, and collaborating. Furthermore, today's digitally savvy, self-sufficient, and more informed buyers have new expectations of salespeople, meaning their traits, the traits rather generally exhibited by women, are more in demand for these kinds of roles. Now, to me, this suggests in our recruitment process, rather than simply looking for one gender over another, for example, we're ultimately searching for candidates that possess these capabilities.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely, absolutely. So I think here, Rich, the takeaways are that we need a general awareness that women may be more suited to the job. You want women to
Yep.
apply for your positions, so you want to market the jobs to encourage women to apply. We need to offer mentorship to women internally, and we need to include women in the recruitment process. The thing to remember here, Rich, is that as we've experienced when placing candidates for clients, is that the reality is that there aren't a huge number of women in senior sales positions currently. So it's likely that the recruitment efforts will still return a greater number of men in the short term. I think the bottom line is that this article highlights that the traits needed within the modern sales environment are typically more prevalent in women. So as time goes on, we might expect to see the industry becoming more gender diverse.
Yeah, definitely. We've actually got a few questions. I'll just read them out from some of the panelists. So we've got not panelists, sorry, that'd be you and I. Some of the participants. We've got one from Nahal. So sorry, we skipped over these questions as we went through faster than we anticipated. So can you give some examples of gender neutral terms, please? Yeah, so look, in the article, Nahal, they're referencing, they're advocating making job descriptions more attractive to women by toning down masculine language. So masculine language such as replacing words like aggressive or compete with what they're advocating as gender neutral terms such as customer focused and succeed. But I think as Zena has quite rightly pointed out earlier on in the discussion, just doing that doesn't necessarily mean you're guaranteed to appeal to women. It's just one of those things that may have an impact. But I think Zena made a very good point earlier on about the and it's a view that I share. I don't think that either gender owns particular wording, if that was what you said, right, Zena?
Yeah, exactly.
So we've got another question from Meredith. So Meredith says, given what you've just said about not having a mentor in your early years, so that's obviously to you, Zena, interested to know if you are now mentoring women.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we like to support our network in any way that we can. So, for example, I may not be involved in a particular mandate, but I'll make myself available to our female candidates, speak to them at the start of their interview process and support them throughout.
So just one more here as well. So a question from James. Zena, another one for you. What advice do you have for an organization like mine that currently has minimal female employees, but we're looking to change that? Are you saying that any female that turns up for an interview will be put off? What to do?
Okay. Great question, James. My advice would be to talk honestly to the candidate about your initiatives to change, providing insight into their future. I mean, what that actually may look like within the company. So it's about the candidate knowing about the company and the company actually selling, what the future looks like, what the roadmap looks like, and all those initiatives. So yeah, definitely be candid in your conversation.
I think that's a super important point to mention, actually, Zena, because especially I know we had a session on this just a couple of weeks ago, actually, about how employers should now not reposition themselves, but how important it is for employers now more than ever to sell their companies in interviews, because we're now in an environment where a lot of interviews are conducted obviously virtually, and people are being recruited before even actually visiting clients' offices, right? So if you roll that into the question that James has just asked, the reality is you have to say, you have to divulge everything in that interview that is going to influence or help this person make a decision about wanting to come work with you. Obviously, that involves explaining about the culture, but then also, as you've mentioned, Zena, whatever kind of diversity initiatives that you intend to embark upon, either now or in the future. Because I think, given what's happening at the moment in the workplace with women in general, these issues are top of mind. So they have to be addressed and brought up by the employer in the interview. Don't assume that because someone hasn't asked the question, it's not important to them. There's an opportunity to definitely cover it off. Thank you for that. Very good question. Sorry, Zena, did you have something else you want to add?
No, that's it.
And then we've got one final question from Michael. So Michael says, right, but how on earth to assess those skills? Okay, so Michael's talking about the skills that we've mentioned earlier on. So connecting, collaborating, and shaping solutions specifically. So yeah, so what we were saying earlier on was, rather than be in pursuit, should we say, of females to recruit into our teams, we should be looking for the skill set first, and then if you've got a short list of candidates that all have these skills, then obviously that would be the time to choose based on gender, let's say. But how do you assess the skills in the first place is the question, which is very good. So you could do it through experiential questioning in the interview, for example. So a couple of questions I've got here that I made a note of. So tell me about a time when you've had to collaborate to service a client, for example. Talk me through your consultative sales approach would be another. Again, so these kind of questions, especially, these are obviously sales specific, but any sales leader would quickly be able to dissect the answers to such questions and determine, okay, what is their experience like? And this is ultimately part of, I guess, the value add with working with Alcon Maddox, being a sales recruitment specialist, is that quite often companies come to us for our support because they can't scrutinize answers and qualify candidates in a way that we can. Or you may want to set up an assessment center, Michael, whereby you provide tasks that give the candidates the opportunity to show how they connect and collaborate. But if anyone's got any further questions regarding that specifically, then just reach out to me after the session directly, and we can arrange a conversation where we can perhaps give you more specific answers related to your business. So look, let's just check and see if there's any other questions coming in a moment. Okay, so great. Look, that's short and sharp session today, 25 minutes. This is a lunch and learn after all. Hope you've enjoyed your lunch. Hope you've enjoyed listening to Zena, our guest speaker today. Zena, thank you very much for joining us.
No, thank you.
I know Zena manages the UK office, so it's obviously a lot earlier in the UK at the moment. So thanks very much, Zena. We'll be back here next month. I think next month the topic for the lunch and learn session will be selling via video conference. So please join us for that. I'll see you next month. Take care, guys. Thank you again.
Thank you. Bye.